Good evening. Does anyone have, any member of council have a question about the order of agenda or questions about anything on the consent agenda?
Your Honor?
Okay.
Can I just add that we did, when you get to the regular meeting, you'll have to approve the order agenda as amended to include the addition of Mr. Namsu giving a public presentation under public information so that he can give you an update on the grant program.
Thank you. I would also like to note that it's 5:25 p.m., just because I didn't say that earlier. Are there any councilor concerns? Councilor Linville.
Thank you, Your Honor. We've had some disturbing kinds of things going on in our country, and the one thing that I've noticed as we've gone through some of these things is that language, especially language from our leaders, matters. And as a result of a previous discussion that we had, I went back and looked at some Facebook screens and found some things that were very disturbing to me. And with all due respect, these are comments that Councillor West has made, and I bring these forward in an effort mostly to create, with an intention to create a teamwork and a team approach on our city council. And the comments that I found that were disturbing particularly to me were things that characterized the council, and I consider myself a member of the council, as being status quo, those wielding power, decisions that we make that might be considered a rubber stamp, people not, many qualified people not perhaps coming forward because they were concerned about being marginalized or unjustly passed over by the council. And that Councillor West, you represented yourself as being working to represent those that feel marginalized, as if no one else on the council cares about our citizens that might feel marginalized. And I just want to say that I think we will never all have the same opinion. We will have differing points of view. And that is great. And discourse that we might have, I think, is all part of our processes. But when we pull ourselves apart as individuals in objection to council and particular council decisions, and purport that to the public as being somehow not fair or not correct, I think it creates an environment in our community that looks at that may look at our council as being less than representative of everyone in our community. And so I just wanted to say, in light of some of the really what has happened in the last month in terms of how we can see how language can really impact people and their actions, that we are just careful, I guess, about how we represent each other, our decisions as a group, as a council. That doesn't mean that we can't indicate that we don't agree with the decision that has been made, but to be appalled by a decision by the council, I think it goes beyond that. So, and I just wanted to share that because I think those comments were disturbing to me and offensive to me as your colleague, as a person who cares about us as a team. So thank you, Your Honor.
I'm recognizing Councillor West.
It's unfortunate that Councilor Linville and I have not had the opportunity to talk about her concerns before this meeting, and that they're just being brought up now in councilor concerns. That's unfortunate. I work hard to adhere to the protocols that we have. I believe in those protocols. I voted for those protocols, but they do not usurp my right to freedom of speech. My speech does not guarantee to be comfortable for everybody, and many people in our community do feel passed over, marginalized, and that they will no longer even apply to a border commission because of the past decisions made by Mayor Knapp and maybe other councilors. I don't know, but I want to make sure that we, going forward, move together as one unit, that we have one purpose, one goal. I don't think anybody on this council has any malice towards anybody, but I also think that I represented a really strong belief by a number of people, probably hundreds or thousands of people that live here in Wilsonville that do feel that way. I think that we've already seen severe negligence where the protocols weren't covered. When I was charged of a Class C felony or accused of such, but through the Secretary of State not following protocol and making sure that people were, and were former NAV accused people in the city of committing a Class C felony. I don't see him following protocols by coming to me first and by asking me, saying, hey, Ben, I got these allegations. I think this might be something that needs to go forward. He never called me as a sitting councilor to bring that issue before me, and he accused people of a Class C felony. That's 5 years in prison and $125,000 fine.
Point of order. Point of order.
How is this a point of order? I was addressed directly through councilors' concerns, and I'm explaining myself on why I feel like that my comments are valid, why I think my free speech rights need to be respected, and you can disagree with my speech completely. I may disagree with your speech, but I'll defend it to the death for you to say what you want to say. And so there is a balance between protocol and free speech, and I'm working to make sure that I follow those things. But I think we need to be consistent in what we condemn, because my speech on Facebook that you brought up, Councilor Linville, is impale compared to being charged of a Class C felony by Mayor Knapp and the allegations he made about other credible, wonderful people in our community that is outside the protocol. So I don't know if this is a time or place, and maybe we need to talk offline, but I am not going to cede my ability to speak my mind, freedom of conscience, my freedom of thought, my values and ideas to the community. I respect this council, but I do disagree with the assertions made by Councilor Linville, and I wish she would have brought them up to me in private.
Thank you, and I want to point out that we do want to allow time for other people to discuss things, and I would like to recess the meeting briefly, please. Meeting is in recess. Do I need a vote for this, Ms. Jacobson?
You can recess for.
I'm going to recess the meeting for 5 minutes. I'd like to call the meeting of the Wilsonville City Council back to order at 5:44 p.m. on February 1st, 2021. I recognize, and I understand Council President Ockervall had her hand raised.
Where's Councilor West?
I will recognize you in just a moment, please. I wanted to make a recommendation that Councilor West and Councilor Linville could meet. I would recommend meeting together to talk about this further. And I would also like to say that when I do use the gavel and say point of order, I am new as being a mayor. The person speaking needs to stop speaking at that point. So the next time that happens again, I will continue using the gavel. If it doesn't work, I will recess the meeting. And that's another point I would like to make is that the comments regarding former Mayor Knapp are incorrect. And I would like to correct the record, and I would like to ask City Manager Cosgrove to correct that statement with the factual information that you have.
So my understanding of what the mayor did is different than what I've been hearing, and I've heard it from a couple people. So I just want to be clear that the mayor never made any accusations that I'm aware of. He received a complaint from a citizen or two citizens that he felt, he sent an email to both myself and Ms. Jacobson asking us what we thought we should do. My communication back to him is that the city does not investigate election law violations. It's not our role. That if I were to advise the citizen, I would advise the citizen to contact the Secretary of State's office and forward the complaint and let them deal with it. And I believe that is what the mayor did. I don't believe that he made any allegation. I see Councilor West shaking his head. I'm just telling you what I'm aware of, that he did not make the allegation that he passed on the citizen's complaint about the potential election violations. That's the extent of what I believe the mayor did.
Thank you. The city manager wanted to correct the record with that statement. And Councilor West, before you speak, I have had a request from Council President Ockervall.
Thank you. My comment is on a completely other topic, and so I will adhere to your direction on when that should be brought up.
Okay, thank you. And as far as we are not a court of law, I don't have any papers here to define any of these things, and I want to keep our discussions away from individuals. I believe that Councilor Linville, from what I'm observing here, was moved to make a statement and wanted to make a statement, and we can further work as a team by having further conversations about that. So I'm recognizing what Councilor West said about that. We will talk further, and I'd like to recognize, I have a hand up by Councilor Lehan, who has not been able to speak yet. So I would like to call on you, and then I will go to Councilor West.
I would just say that we have to be, as we have come to be aware, we have to be very careful about the words that we choose to use. And I think that's what Councilor Linville was saying. Case in point, and when things started to come apart right there, is Councilor West was saying that the former mayor charged him with a Class C felony. Charge is a legal and technical term which he has no ability to do, and it's the wrong word to use. My understanding is the same as Mr. Cosgrove's, that he passed on information which was even short of accusing, but certainly it did not rise to the level of charging, which is something he has no capacity to do. So we have to be very careful about the words that we use in these situations where we are acting as city councilors. Just a reminder about that.
Thank you, Councillor Lehan. Councillor West.
So I have the letter from the Secretary of State that says exactly what happened. It is my understanding that he did not legally charge me because, of course, he doesn't have that opportunity, but that he made the accusations because he submitted the complaint. And in the letter from the Secretary of State, it says that he made the complaint and alleged the false allegations, not only of me, but of also I think four other reputable, great citizens in our community. He did not have the respect to actually come to me and say, hey, Ben, I'm getting these allegations. Maybe if we just turn them into the Secretary of State, or if I direct them to go there themselves, then they can get to the bottom of this and this will just go away.
I know I'm not part of the council,
Point of
but
order, please.
yeah, just
Point of order.
I was just gonna say, this is all not something we should be doing. The former mayor is a private citizen now. If he and Councillor West have issues, this is no place for that discussion to take place, because now we put the former mayor in the position of having to listen to this. He's not here to defend himself. You're hearing one side of it. It's just the same situation that we had with Ms. Arbonne and Mr. O'Neill, and I don't think we want to continue to go down this path. I'm just advising that we not do this.
So everyone can just read it for themselves. And I think that that was outside the protocol itself.
Point of order, please. Point of order. Please respect the gavel. When I'm saying point of order and you're talking, Councillor West, I can't hear what you're saying. I don't know what you're saying. So that's why it's important when I say point of order to stop talking. Okay? That's what it says. Every person on this council is supposed to respond in that same way. And the purpose is to stop the conversation at that point for different reasons. I'm going to wrap up this conversation. I will call on Councillor Linville one more time, and I want this to be not a conversation that describes an individual person, and stay with the original point of ways to communicate, which will involve individual discussions. Councillor Linville.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will have an offline conversation with Councillor West to further, but my comments were really to hopefully, it was certainly not on any individual action. It was not, didn't have anything to do with anything particular, and I just, they're just my own feelings. So I just, I will address Councillor West offline, and I just thought it was appropriate for us to talk about it here. So.
Thank you, Councillor Linville. I would like to now go back and recognize Council President Aukerball.
Thank you. I have actually a question for staff, I believe, and that is, there is a large, metal, it's not a dumpster, but it's a metal large container that's on Kinsman Road, or at least it was this afternoon. I think I last drove by 3:30, and it looks like it was there to collect some, branches or organic material, and it's in the turn signal that is not being used, so cars theoretically should not be driving into it. So I just thought, in the winter weather and darkness, there are cones that are around this container, but I wondered if it is there for any, and maybe it's already gone, but if it is there for any period of time in the darkness, maybe flashers or something like that to really highlight it, because Kinsman's kind of a curvy, has some curves, and darkness during winter, and just some people drive quicker on Kinsman as well. So
thank you.
I just want to suggest that.
Thank you. So
I don't know that it belongs to the city either, but I don't know who.
Ask the city manager to ask someone to look into that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. One point I wanted to bring up on councilor concerns is just briefly, as we I wanted to note, we have had 4 city council meetings in 29 days. I think that's a lot. And there's a lot going on. one of the areas that I spoke to people about, counselors early on, was ways we could improve the meetings. One way is our choice of words, of course. We've all talked about that. Another one is time in the meeting. And I'm not being critical of the time we've spent here discussing this at all. I'm just looking ahead at future meetings. And the different sections have different uses. And one of the sections I wanted to focus on was the communications section, which is generally, and please correct me if I need better explanation of this, Ms. Jacobson and Mr. Cosgrove. But on the communications section, that may be one area where we can manage our time a little better, because there are other parts of the meeting that we don't know how long they will go. They have different things that can come up and can make our meetings very long. So on the communications section, it is really a place where someone, it might be city staff, it might be one of our government officials from the region or another city, state, would come and present something to inform us of, and there is a chance to, ask some questions. In that case, I'm going to ask if you could all participate in a method where we would just ask, if there's a question, keep it to a single question. I've noticed that compound questions end up with longer answers, and it's harder for the public to maybe follow what the question was. So that's one point there, single questions, maybe a comment, just keep it focused, and then we'll go from one counselor to the next and just keep the time going. And ideally, that would go for, just one per counselor. If it turns out the subject might be one that we didn't know about it and we seem to want a lot more discussion, then that's good. We should have that discussion, but I'm going to look to the city manager to find the right mechanism for that. Is it a work session? Is it, what is it? But I don't want to just have that one. I think we can work on that section together and keep it from getting too long. So I took a lot of time there, so thank you for listening to that. We'll now move into our pre-council work session, and the first item on our work session agenda is City Council representation on the Tourism, Promotion, and Metro Enhancement Committees. Ms. Monahan is recognized.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor Fitzgerald and City Council. This evening I am here to check in with you about, I'm Bill Monahan. I'm the assistant to the city manager. And this evening I am here to check in with you about our Metro Wilsonville Community Enhancement Committee and Tourism Promotion Committee. These are both committees that I serve as the staff liaison to, and they're both committees that have a council representative. As you'll recall, back in January, Mr. Ottenod was here to check in with you about the regional boards that we have representation to. Since we're a little short on time this evening, I'm going to really briefly give you a high level of what these two committees do, as there will be counselors representing this group on those committees and serving as their liaison. So the Tourism Promotion Committee is one that works to implement the tourism development strategy. It meets a minimum of 4 times a year. There are 7 voting members and 5 ex officio members. 1 ex officio non-voting member is a city council representation to that board. Currently, City Councilor Lehan serves as their representative, and they have requested that they continue to have Councilor Lehan serve as their liaison. That was discussed at the TPC's December 2020 meeting. The other board is the Wilsonville Metro Community Enhancement Committee. They generally meet 2 to 3 times a year to discuss the community enhancement grant application. These grants are funded through Metro. We receive $1 for every 1 ton of wet waste processed at Republic Services. That money goes through Metro to us to then fund these community enhancement projects. There are multiple goals that can be met in order to apply for these grants, but this committee is charged with reviewing those applications and making a recommendation to the City Council on how they should be spent. This committee has 4 community members and 2 City Council representatives. One has been Councilor Linville, and the other was previously former Mayor Knapp had served on this committee. in that capacity. They will also likely meet 1 or 2 more times in addition to their regular meetings as we've been working on updating their program information. So we do believe that Councilor Lindahl's participation, or I believe that her participation on this board continuing would be helpful as we continue to evaluate our grant. So as I mentioned, this evening I'm just here to check in about the participation on the council. We do have 1 vacancy that we do need to have filled. The other 2 we'd be happy to keep in their same positions if that is what pleases the council. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Monahan. And Councilor West, I had mentioned at the last work session, which I believe was about 2 weeks ago, that I was considering asking you to serve as the second counselor on the Metro Community Enhancement Grants Board. And as Ms. Monahan described, and in the materials we were given in our council packet, it does have 2 city councilors. That is what is in the bylaws, to have 2. And Councilor Linville is continuing. And I sent you a text. I don't know if you had a chance to think about it, if you would like to take that position.
Yeah. Okay, if I address,
yeah.
I'd like to have a moment to think about that and maybe talk to you offline about it in the next day or 2, if that's okay.
Okay, and that there is a long description of it in the council packet that we have, and it includes the bylaws, and it includes a description basically of everything the committee does. Okay. Do you have any questions about how often it meets or anything like that?
Yeah, that was my next question, is how often, just for the record, how often does it meet? And then when you say the bylaws have 2 counselors, is that like an alternate type of position, or is that we both attend and work on it together type of position?
Yeah, it's not an alternate. It's just two counselors.
Okay.
Ms. Monahan, can you take a look at that and remind me of how often they meet? I don't think it's terribly often.
No, we generally meet 2 to 3 times in the spring. It's often been in March and April as we prepare to get council's approval in May in time for us to allocate the funds at the beginning of the fiscal year. We use Doodle as our way of selecting our meetings. So we don't have set meeting times or meeting dates. It's generally a weeknight evening, and it's based on what works best for all of the members of our committee. We need to ensure we have quorum, and we also meet in time, but it's generally pretty flexible. And as I mentioned, we'll likely meet once or twice in the summer or fall. Again, it's based on the availability of our members.
And this is another committee that just had people appointed to it. There were a total of 48 applicants, I believe, for 22 positions in December. I believe 12 of the positions were for the Kitakata Committee, and then the remainder were for the other committees. And so there were not enough openings for everyone who applied to be appointed. But we did appoint all of those, and they come open periodically. So it really does have citizen involvement, and they have a good opportunity to be involved in these projects that, just represent the city when they get applications, thinking about, okay, how does that sound for a city? Does that, do they have enough information? They might ask for a little more information. So it's really a response back and forth, and then deciding how to allocate that money. And you're doing that with 2 city councilors and members of the public who are on that committee. So I'd be glad to wait a couple of days for you to let us know, because I don't think we have to vote on this, and I will leave that open to hear back from Councilor West. Okay, thank you.
I can get back to you by the end of the week, or maybe by midweek, if that's okay with you, Mayor.
Sure. I mean, they're not meeting tomorrow. That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Monahan. And next up, we'll receive a report from planning staff. Oh, Ms. Monahan, is that enough? Did I go too fast? Did you finish?
No, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Next up, we will receive, we'll have a discussion on the city's efforts related to middle housing. And Mr. Pauly is recognized, and we had a significant amount of reading in our packet on this and a lot of preparation. So, Mr. Pauly, thank you.
Good evening, Council, and thank you. Let me share PowerPoint I have here just a moment. Okay, I think I clicked enough to get there, so here we are. So on this, really for tonight, on the project, which I appreciate all the reading that the council did, there is a lot of content we sent your way. And happy to talk about any of it we have time to, and also happy to talk to individual councilors offline about any of it. I know there's a lot of it, but after I share some background and base information, I would suggest that we focus on two topics to make sure the project team and the Planning Commission get the guidance needed from council. And this is concerning project objectives and some different compliance options for the Frog Pond West area. First, for those that may be listening and not familiar, what is middle housing? Briefly, it's housing that's not single family and not multifamily or apartments. So middle housing may include either a few units on a single lot, such as a duplex or a triplex, or homes on their own lots that share a common wall, such as townhouses or attached single family. For purpose of state law that we're working on complying with, specifically does middle housing to include duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, townhouses, and something called cottage clusters, which are defined as small detached homes around a common courtyard. So as we talked about in some other work sessions that I believe most councilors are familiar, House Bill 2001 directs cities throughout Oregon to take a number of actions related to middle housing, including allowing duplexes on each lot zoned for residential use. That also allows for development of detached single-family homes, as well as allowing these other middle housing types such as triplexes, quadplexes, and cottage clusters and townhomes in those same areas as long as certain requirements such as lot size are met. So that is really some state requirements that we're working with. So we previously discussed this in some work sessions about how the city wants to approach this, and the council indicated support of a project to conform with these new state laws by developing updates tailored to Wilsonville rather than going with a state model code. In addition to complying with the state law, and more importantly, the project looks at implementation of actions from the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan adopted by council last year. This includes implementation action 1B to incorporate equitable housing into middle housing planning. So over the last number of months, city staff supported by a consultant team audited the city's comprehensive plan, the development code, and all of our legislative master plans, such as Villaba and Frog Pond West, for compliance with the House bill and related administrative rules, as well as the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan. And then based on this audit, the project team began drafting some updates to the various codes and plans, and the project team reviewed these with the Planning Commission in November and February. So with our time short, let's go ahead and jump into the objectives. So really want to point out that this project is not happening in a vacuum. It's really building upon the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan, as well as other goals and policies laid out by council previously. So staff has drawn from all those documents that have been thoughtfully put together by council and the community and drafted these objectives that you can see here, which includes a thoughtful, inclusive built environment, the compliance with House Bill 2001, meeting housing needs through middle housing to help meet the needs of a diverse community, impactful public outreach, and that includes particularly to inform middle housing design and the type of housing that is encouraged by our standards. And this includes outreach to historically marginalized communities of color, including specific outreach to the Latinx community supported by a Metro grant which also we're working on integrating and coordinating with diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So infrastructure is important when we're working with housing, so understanding both how we may need to update our infrastructure plans as well as infrastructure financing options related to middle housing. As we look at these standards, we want to make sure they're usable and that there's a high likelihood that developers or property owners could successfully use them. And also building upon a council goal, look at parking congestion and different parking strategies and policies we can adopt related to this. We're limited based on state rules on what we can do with parking, but there are some opportunities to address that through the project as well. So with that said, interested in council's feedback that if these project objectives accurately reflect the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan and other goals the council has laid out, or anything that they'd like to see changed, taken away, or added here. And then once we have that discussion, we can talk about Frog Pond West. So open to comments from council at this point.
Give hands up.
Linda?
I'm sorry, did you recognize me?
Sure. Go ahead, and by the way, let's just have a discussion here, and go ahead, Councilor Linville.
Well, thank you, Mr. Pauly. I watched the Planning Commission meeting when they went through this these recommendations, made their recommendations, and that was a long meeting. And so I know that we will not spend that amount of time going over them. And they really did a lot of work and had a lot of discussion. I think these objectives, the only thing that I think is not in there is probably the attempt to implement, and maybe it's in number 1, but the attempt to implement the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan. So, and if it's subsumed in number 1, that's fine, but it's not out there as a project objective totally. So.
Could we, just before we go on, Mr. Pauly, can we just add that as a bullet? I mean, we're in a work session, we're discussing this, or is this set because it came from the Planning Commission?
No, this is really project objectives that we want feedback from the council to take back to the Planning Commission to guide their work.
Okay, Councilor West.
Mr. Pauly, I know that this is such an intense and meaty topic, and I know you've put probably a ton of work, not just recently, but throughout the years on this issue. If I'm correct, I think some of this even goes back to when Mayor Fitzgerald was a councilor and talking about Frog Pond stuff, if I'm correct. And I guess my question is, I know there was a lot of compromises and a lot of planning done before I was on the council, on a previous council. And then we have House Bill 2001, and then we have like our kind of our equitable housing kind of goals as a council and strategic plan. And so some things have changed and things have developed. Can you kind of explain to me and to the public, is there significant changes to the compromises made by previous councils, or does House Bill 2001 or new decisions kind of change kind of what was expected moving forward? And how does House Bill 2001 specifically like tweak this or like adjust this type of work that we're doing out in that area in development?
So I will talk about it in more detail once we go through these objectives. I have some talking points to it. So.
Oh, you do? Okay, perfect.
Okay, so should we move on with Mr. Pauly? And I think he did have in the call-out boxes and those materials coming from the Planning Commission discussions, there is a great, pretty robust depth of, okay, option A could work, option B would do this. It reflects what we did in the years past. yes, but, and all these different considerations. And so as we discuss this, I think we're going to hear some of the pluses and minuses and within the rigor of complying with state law. So look forward to seeing what we can find regarding Councilor West's comment.
Yeah, certainly. And any other comments specifically on these objectives, or do they sound consistent with what council is?
If I may, the Bayshell Planning Director at the City of Wilsonville, I do want to make sure, since the council, there were a couple councilors asking questions about the language related to the project objectives. I want to make sure that you see the longer version of each of these project objectives Mr. Polly has presented to you in the staff report. It's on page 2 of 4 of that staff report. And it gives a much more comprehensive listing of each of those project objectives that we just didn't have room for on a slide. That might help you better understand the intent of each of them as you move forward in this discussion.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I also abbreviated my description for sake of time here. So yes, they are much more laid out in the staff report. But and a lot of them do, back to Councilor Linville's comment, do specifically tie into the equitable housing strategic plan. So, and we can come back to these. Let's go ahead and talk Frog Pond a bit. First of all, I need to go back and briefly into some of the rulemaking because there's some nuances here that end up being pretty significant to Wilsonville. So in the rules, in the adopted rules for existing master plans like Billabong and Frog Pond West, the continued build out of the it allows for the continued build out of the master plan areas without meeting all the minimum compliance standards of the rules, as long as a few criteria are met. First of all, they're planned for a minimum of 8 dwelling units per acre, which in the Billabong case isn't a problem. So the Billabong compliance is fairly straightforward, which I won't really go into here. The second is they allow at least single-family homes and duplexes on each unbuilt lot. That goes back to that first part of the bill that duplexes have to be allowed on every lot. And third, they allow for future redevelopment of all middle housing types once the master plan is built out. You know, it's a long-range thing. So really for Frog Pond West, what it comes down to is the currently adopted density, which is 6.7 units per acre, is below the 8 dwelling units per acre threshold to use this special language for master planned areas. So in order to comply with state law, we can either modify the Frog Pond West master plan to get to that 8 units per acre, or the master plan area would allow all middle housing types as identified in the state rules, which includes quadplexes, triplexes, row houses. So to help with the discussion, the project team presented the PC with 3 options. And really what the discussion focused on is how to balance the 2017 Frog Pond West Master Plan and the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan, where the desired mix of housing do not necessarily agree. So in short, option 1 keeps the master plan essentially how it is today, with allowing each single family lot to also be a duplex as required by the House bill. The added capacity of the duplex allowance increases the net density above the 8 dwelling units per acre, but much of that density would likely not be built. And the PC felt that this was doing too little in support of equitable housing. The second option would be modify the Frog Pond West Master Plan to allow a specific increase in the number of units in various sub-districts. You can see the sub-districts on this slide. So we reach 8 dwelling units per acre. All dwellings would continue to be either single-family detached or also be allowed in duplexes, as the House bill requires. This option provides developers guidance on where to put additional housing and better encourages the added housing to actually be built. Then option 3 would be the default if we didn't do anything to change the master plan. It would default to requiring all types of middle housing, which would be the biggest change in terms of potential for additional townhouses and larger units that would be different from the Frog Pond West Master Plan. So after all this discussion, the Planning Commission supported somewhere between the second and third option, which saying that, strategically adding units into the master plan to get to the 8 units of acre, but making sure those additional units are middle housing, thus encouraging some level of middle housing occurring in Frog Pond West while remaining overall consistent with the urban design and kind of layout of the 2017 plan. One way to do that, what the Planning Commission indicated, would be to allow a specific number of 2-unit townhouses, which are essentially single-family homes with a shared wall, their own lot, and cottage cluster units, in addition to the required allowance of duplexes on each remaining undeveloped lot. This limits the additional middle housing to only the middle housing types that are currently allowed in the zoning code for Frog Pond West. Again, this would be one way of achieving the PC's recommendation, but there can certainly be others that we'll continue to explore. We would like your input then on the Planning Commission, where the Planning Commission landed on this, and which option the City Council would like staff to move forward with, and any specific ideas if we do pursue this option 2 type approach.
So, Councilor Linville.
So, in reading about option, I think option 3 goes too far. That's just my opinion. So for me, it's a decision of option 1 or 2, and I think in line with Councilor West's comment, much of the master planning was done before I was on the council. So I have a question in the original decision for Frog Pond West Master Plan, all of the sub-districts, am I correct in assuming that all of the sub-districts were at the 6.67 density? And that is what's currently on the books for all of the sub-districts at the current time?
So it's an average across, so some, like the large lot sub-district is below that, the small lot sub-district slightly above. When you average it across the master plan, it comes to 6.7, and that's really the standard that the state's looking at.
Okay, so there still are some lots that are smaller, and on those lots, and then, so if option 2 was accepted, would it be then the city deciding which areas, which sub-districts would be affected, or would it be based on requirements that might be put on the builders at the time that those subdivisions are designed?
We would work with developers, landowners, and the public to identify where those additional units would go.
So under option 1, it could be the entire Frog Pond West could stay as it is, except that the options increase across the entire master plan should they want to increase. Is that correct?
Correct. Any of the lots could be a single-family home or a duplex.
Or a middle house, or a duplex, right. Okay.
And I have a question on that, just to understand how option 1 would work. It says, I'm sorry I'm repeating this, but it says allow each single-family lot to be a duplex as required. So what if no builders come along and nobody seems to want to build a duplex? And so, you just don't end up achieving this goal. How does that work?
So in terms of compliance, I mean, there's certainly the equitable housing goals and housing goals that the city may have locally, but I'll speak briefly to what the state requirements are. It's about allowance, zoned allowance. It doesn't necessarily regulate performance.
Okay. So you don't have some penalty if nobody shows up wanting to build duplexes?
Correct.
And so then option 2 is modifying, if you're going to increase, that calls for increasing the number of units in specific areas. So in number 2, would it be required to have a certain number of, let's say, duplexes?
No, it wouldn't be required. They could still build. It'd be an option, and typically market forces. You could sell, 2 homes on the same land as 1 home.
Okay.
The market's going to work out that a developer.
So it's the same kind of concept that you're making it possible, but you don't know what the market will want to do. I mean, could be there's no demand. And then option 3 is you would, again, is that still an option that if nobody chooses, you're not requiring people to do that, you're just allowing the option?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor West.
Thank you for recognizing me. I am a little concerned because I know that we can't control House Bill 2001, even though we outperform the metrics better than anybody else in the state regarding more what they would call equitable housing or multifamily housing or apartments or different type middle housing. So my concern is that still servicing that area are old country roads, and a lot of compromise and tons of citizen input, a lot, was put in to come up with what we have now. And I guess my concern is that have we have any thoughts on the traffic impact? I have always believed that higher density housing, the best place to put it is closer to essential services or the city core. And this is on the very outskirts of the city on old country roads and traffic and impact, environment, and all of that stuff. And so I'm a little bit concerned about changing what had already been done, and then that would potentially exacerbate real livability issues out in that part, in the distant part of our city. I don't know if that has been brought up or if that's something we need to look at again before we pick an option. So I guess those are a couple thoughts I had.
Yeah, and then in the scope of projects, we're working with DKS to relook at this and see how in all the infrastructure, how it's going to affect the planned infrastructure. And so including traffic. And I will tell you we don't have numbers yet, studies, and they've shared with me that typically it's not like if you put a duplex, it's not double the traffic as a single family in their models. There's some weird nuances in the studies they've done across the region and across the nation that doesn't necessarily, it's not, you're not doubling traffic by turning a single family home to a duplex. I don't understand all the rationale, but that's what the studies and the data that they work with show.
Can I add to that, Dan, real quickly? When we're talking about city development, all those developments will be brought up to an urban standard, so I'm not sure where the rural issue comes into play. Furthermore, all those subdivisions will be served by our smart transit system, so any services that need to be provided could be provided by our smart transit system as well. So while anything beyond what's urbanized by the city is still rural, and there are real impacts on those rural roadways, in terms of the city itself, all those subdivisions will have urban infrastructure, including streets.
Yeah, and the concurrency rules still apply. So, they have to meet urban standards for service. That doesn't change.
And Dan, could you quickly do a summary of concurrency for us? I would do it, but I'm sure I won't say it as correctly as you will.
So essentially, the development has to be served at set levels within 2 years of being developed. So you can't build something unless there's infrastructure to support it, is the short of it.
Thank you, Mr. Pauly. Now, for the rest of this report, this topic, what more do we want to cover in today's work session?
Just if there's any specific impact, or I'd love to hear from councilors their preference in terms of the options, so that staff and the planning commission can more successfully move forward in getting this out to the public and making a decision.
And the planning commission, can you restate their recommendation for us one more time, please?
Their recommendation was to go with an option 2, however, designating all the additional units as middle housing, which we're talking in number-wise about 121 additional units planned for Frog Pond West to get to 8 dwelling units per net acre.
And Mayor, I don't know if you can see, but Councilor Lehan has had her raised hand.
I'm sorry. I was looking at the report. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I had my little yellow hand up.
Sorry.
It doesn't seem to work.
I'm sorry. I was studying the report. I shouldn't look at it.
Do we have a slide that has option 1, 2, 3 summary or something like that? Or is that in our packet?
It is on page 41 on the packet, or page 4 of 12 on the
42.
42. Okay. And then just to clarify, back on when you had the picture of the houses, the middle houses and the single family and the multifamily, I wanted to ask about Charbonneau's townhouses on the golf course. Do those fall on, they are mostly duplexes is my recollection. Some of them are triplexes. I mean, they're common wall townhouses on the golf course. It seemed to me it used to be those were counted as single family, but maybe that has changed.
Right, so traditionally we've considered them as attached single family in our numbers, but they do meet the new state definition of townhouse, which is an attached unit on its own lot. So it would be considered middle housing under the state rules.
Okay, so do we currently count them that way, or we count them the way we used to count them?
We're transitioning to counting them as middle housing.
Transition. Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
Councilor Lindell.
Well, I would like, I hear Mr. Pauly saying, get on with coming with a recommendation, and so that's where I'm trying to go. I really appreciated that the Planning Commission feedback acknowledged that public outreach will be very, very important to any changes that are going to be made to Frog Pond West. And I really concur with that and look for that opportunity for the input. I do not support option number 3, and as I indicated, option number 2, and for me, it's between number 2 and number 1. My concern about option number 2 is that it goes beyond the density allowance it's beyond 100%. And so I wonder if there's a way that we can back off a little bit and still do that, do option number 2. But I actually would be fine with option number 1 as well.
Let's see. Council President Ackervall.
Thank you. So to give kind of my feedback on where I am in this process now, and I understand that more outreach is happening and conversations will be happening over some time. But I guess I'm reflecting back, you know, about 6 months ago, I believe it was June of last year, we had the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan, and I feel like we all kind of made a commitment with that plan to provide a variety of housing in our city and to be responsive to the needs of the community. In fact, isn't that that was number 3 on the bullets for the objectives, right? To respond to the needs of the community, which I do think that's a good objective. I thought that was a good list of objectives. It seems to me that we need to be able to do this in a thoughtful way. We want to do this in a thoughtful way. And that option 2 would allow for some of this to happen. However, option 2 could mean many different things. So I look forward to seeing how option number 2 could be further defined. I would like to encourage that the additions are not just added single. Let's see. There was a correction in our packet about the terminology single-family homes. So I'm retraining myself to use the different term, which is single detached home. Was that what we are to use now? Oh, I think you all know what I mean, but I'll continue to learn the correct term that we want to use for that product type. But I want to see a variety of homes, and I want to see it done in a thoughtful way that's conducive to the overall feel of the neighborhood. I don't think that, you know, I wouldn't be interested in building more homes simply for the sake of building more homes. I would want to build the right homes for the needs of the community. And I think that I do agree that the conversation, you know, with our community members, with developers, perhaps the diversity, equity, inclusion group as well are going to be important in this in the process. And kind of when we're looking at specifically how and where this development occurs, I see many different possibilities for option number 2. I think some of them could work quite well for our city, and but maybe not all of them would work quite well for our city. So,
thank you. Councilor Lehan.
Yes, now that I have these options in front of me, I would agree with what Councilor Akval was saying, and I am most attracted to option 2. I think that it's important to give the marketplace enough flexibility to build what is in demand. And I think that we kind of went a long ways the other way on the first phase of Frog Pond, and the market did not have the flexibility that they needed, and it kind of languished there for a while. But there's another reason, and that is besides recognizing diversity in the community, the situation with the pandemic has kind of changed the situation with housing needs also. Many of the housing things that we built, for instance, the park at Merrifield, when it was being built, I would go and walk through the houses when they were all the same, and I finally gave it up. They were a big master suite with a big master bath, 3 tiny bedrooms, and 1 tiny bathroom. And they were all the same thing, but they didn't allow for things like multi-generational households, multiple adult households. And now with the pandemic, you see there's been, the bloom is off the rose with the whole open concept thing. So people are discovering that if they're all going to be together all day long, we need some areas where we can separate ourselves out, at least for to be able to do various simultaneous Zooms. So I think that the housing market is changing, and the demands will be changing, and I want to give builders, developers, the flexibility to respond to those demands as they are shifting in the community, not build the same product over and over. So for that reason, I like number 2.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lehan. And I too am leaning toward option 2 and recognizing that it does offer flexibility to the market. And one of the other points I'm thinking of in the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan, looking at different interests of housing, is not always a smaller house, but a house that could accommodate that 3-generation family. I have a friend who's in that mode right now, and it's working very well for them. They were able to convert their garage, is what they needed, but to make that happen. But it's what their family needs, and it's working. And so we don't know exactly what all of this, the market would be, and the interest. And when you read through that great depth of material, it's going to be challenging. We want to maintain the look and feel of our neighborhoods. We want to have quality housing. We want to keep the nature of the neighborhoods that we have come to want, and also comply with the state law. So I think option 2 does give us some flexibility there. Any other comments? Because I don't have gallery view, I'm moving it. Councillor West, I have to move it up and down.
Thank you. I guess I haven't really talked about like where I'm leaning. Without significant outcry from the public to change the plan that they already approved and worked on and went through a lengthy, long process at times had a lot of great debate back and forth, and to change that plan, it wasn't all that long ago that happened. I think we should just try to meet the compliance to state law and respect what our voters and constituents really already planned on, and one does that the best. Unless we want to reopen the entire process and have that discussion again, which it sounds like some might be. I don't know if that's kind of what Council President Akeball was maybe alluding to, is opening up that conversation again, considering new legislation and our strategic equity plan, our equity housing plan. But I think it's important that there has been a lot of pain points with people that live in meadows and in those neighborhoods out there in the distant parts of the city, and having that become denser out there than what was already planned in that area may really impact the quality of life for our citizens. So I'm leaning towards 1 a little bit. I understand 2 is kind of a compromise, but I'm leaning towards 1.
Okay, I appreciate that. I wonder if you could give, just for all of us, just for our discussion, a little more insight onto what you like about 1. I'm not challenging, I'm just looking for more illumination on what about 1 accomplished?
I think that's a great question. I think for me, like what strikes a chord with me is I feel like 1, just trying to find the compliance with House Bill 2001 and move forward. It does change the opportunity potentially for some of the development that will happen there, but we're meddling the least amount in what had already been decided. I think that is what's most appealing to me after a long process has already been done. And it's respecting that long process. And you know more about what had happened, I feel like, Mayor Fitzgerald, because you were a part of that with the previous council. I think that happened, and you probably could speak to that process better than I can. But I want to really respect, and I know that a lot of thought has gone into that. So I just feel like 1 respects that the most right now. We're still trying to find that compliance piece and that balance. But if citizens change their mind and they tell us to do otherwise, then I'm open to another option. But that's why I lean towards 1. I don't know if that's clear.
Well, and I'm not sure either. I mean, could Mr. Pauly give us a little more understanding on number 1? It says you're allowing a duplex on every lot. So the density allowance increases by 80 to 90%, taking into account the lots already developed. How does that compare to number 2? I just want to hear from Dan to make sure I'm getting it. The differences between those 2, and I think what you're talking about, if I'm hearing you right, Councillor West, is how much can you leave as it is? Which option lets you leave more as it is?
Yeah, that's really my point. With that option that does that is the one that I tend to gravitate to.
And so briefly, option 2 takes option 1 and adds to it specific numbers of increased middle housing, which would be beyond duplexes, specifically the allowance for something like the 2 units, townhouses, or the or cottage clusters. So it's not necessarily opening it up to all middle housing, but it still would allow duplexes everywhere. It just designates certain areas that developers could add additional middle housing besides the duplexes.
Okay, thank you. And then oh, go ahead. I've got another hand.
Wait,
Sorry, I was just...
Before you continue, hold up. I hate to be Debbie Downer here. We have 40 minutes of session, 2 more items, and we're 15 minutes away from supposedly reconvening in our regular meeting. So I think,
Ms. Bachel,
I think if you want to continue discussing this, I think you're maybe just going to have to table this and bring it back, or we're not going to get to the other 2 items tonight.
I think maybe we if that's allowable, we could do that because there's a lot to this. And so, Ms. Bachel, do you want to add one comment and let us know if that causes any big time problems if we do that?
Yeah, and I might let Mr. Pauly actually address the timing, but I think one of the key things I would also note is it's not just about the extra density change between option 1 and 2. It's about the different middle housing type as well. So for example, if we're allowing duplexes as well as the 2-unit townhomes, those end up playing out a little bit different on the ground in terms of opportunities for ownership, how the lot line is drawn. And so I do think that there might be some more nuance that we could come back and talk to you about more. I think we've gotten enough clarity that there's definitely interest in what option 2 could look like, and there's difference there, and that we might want to come back with some more clarification between that and option 1. I'm not hearing a lot for option 3, so I think that gives us some initial direction to be able to come back to you.
That's helpful, and I also like
good.
Option 2 gives a greater, I'm guessing, a greater variety of people to become homeowners as well, perhaps. Okay, Mr. Pauly, you want to help us wrap up, please?
Sure, and there will be some items we need to move forward to Planning Commission for next week, but still there's plenty of room for more conversation if we have room on the work session on the 15th.
Can they hold us?
And I think you've heard from everybody on council in terms of where they want to land on this, so I don't think you need any more direction. If council wants this to come back, it will come back at the appropriate time anyway, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
This isn't the last they're going to see of it.
Thank you, Mr.
There's
Pauly.
at least 2 more work sessions before even it gets.
There you go, okay.
Kind of moving it forward.
And before the next time we discuss it, perhaps we can have counselors come in and meet with staff in like spend an hour ahead of time. Okay, I'd like to move to Town Center Streetscape Plan with staff. Planning Department staff, please.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Mr. Bradford to do the Cliff Notes version of his presentation, and I'm going to ask Ms. Rodacher just to hold her staff report until the regular meeting. I hate to use the word no-brainer on hers, but I can't imagine that anybody on council would not want us to save $3 million, so we don't really need to do that in work session.
Thank you. We will skip that one.
Good evening, Mayor Fitzgerald, City Councilors. My name is Philip Bradford, Associate Planner with the city. I'm excited to introduce and familiarize City Council with the Town Center Streetscape Plan. Project background is in the packet, and there's also an attachment in the packet that provides an overview of the community outreach and the feedback we've received on this project so far, which will allow me to cut some time from this presentation. So tonight before you seeking input on 2 questions on the overall direction of the concepts thus far, and to confirm that the concepts align with the vision for Town Center that's contained in the Town Center Master Plan. And those questions will be covered at the end of the presentation. This is tonight's agenda. And moving on, just to provide a brief overview on what the streetscape plan is aiming to accomplish. It comes from the Town Center Master Plan. It's an implementation item that that aims to realize several of the Town Center goals. So we were lucky enough to be able to hit the ground running with this project, as there is a lot of other city projects that have been completed recently that involve different community involvement or community preferences on aesthetics that we were able to incorporate into coming up with 3 preliminary design concepts for the plan. So really quickly, the project schedule, we started in September, but this will be before City Council once again in the spring for further comment, and then once again, either late spring or early summer for adoption. We held a site visit in September of 2020 to familiarize our consultant, Sarah Design, who may or may not be in the work session by the time I finish this presentation. Hopefully they will be. We did a site visit for Town Center that familiarized them with the site and saw different fixtures and materials so that they could work off the strengths and get an idea of the context. So, focusing on our 3 design concepts that we've created thus far, the first of the 3 is the agricultural legacy, which is trying to evoke Wilsonville's history as an agricultural area and equestrian area prior to the city's incorporation. And just a quick note, so each concept has a different diagram that is color-coded. So the colors each mean a different component of the streetscape plan. So the blue note of space, the sidewalk that you'd be walking through. Purple represents gathering space, orange represents public art, and green is landscaped areas. And you'll see this throughout each concept as I go through them. The agricultural legacy uses more rustic materials that you can see on this slide, natural wood, steel, and it evokes the agricultural feel while still keeping a modern clean lines, which is one thing that we've noted on the community's design preferences throughout other outreach on design. The other concept is technological innovation, which focuses on Wilsonville's past and future as a high technology hub with the various firms that we do have located in the city. And this one incorporates more clean lines, more modular design, and incorporates different technological aspects that represent a very modern town center that could manifest itself in these different ways in the pictures that are shown. You can see vehicle chargers, phone chargers integrated into the lighting posts, and a very modern aesthetic with the paving materials and so on. The third concept is the river theme, which is evoking the Willamette River, which is located not too far from Wilsonville's town center. And this one is much more fluid and organic and uses more curvilinear shapes throughout the design that would evoke the river. And these images are included to show how that could manifest itself in the final form of what's built in town center in the future, showing more curved seating areas, curved planting areas, and other aspects of the public realm. So after going to conducting one public forum and then going to Planning Commission and receiving the feedback that is included in your packet. Staff and the consultant team work to refine the concepts a little bit further. You'll see those, the full version of those in the subsequent council work session that will be in the spring for additional feedback. But as a teaser for familiarizing council and getting design preferences at this point, this is how we've refined the agricultural legacy and how it could manifest itself in a future intersection of town center. And you can see those aesthetics that were shown on the previous slides, which were the draft concepts now incorporated into the more refined version. Then this is the technological innovation plan view, and then you can see the similar designs shown on the slides that showed the tech innovation with the pictures, and you can see that manifest itself into the streetscape here with more linear seating areas and pavement design. And then finally, the river concept, which shows more undulating pavement types, and the planting areas would be also curvilinear and more natural forms in the public art and plaza spaces that are incorporated into the building areas. Just to clarify, the darker gray spaces would be possible existing or future buildings in town center, just to make sure that that's clear. Then with that, we can move on to the questions. So I'm going to read both questions once, and then we can have a discussion and questions on them together for the sake of time. So are the three design concepts consistent with the community expectations determined through prior public engagement and town center planning? And second, after reviewing the design concepts, are there specific elements that capture the vision of town center that you would like to see emphasized in the streetscape plan?
Councilor West.
Be super quick. I know that maybe the council can help me. I know we made a recent kind of call on design plans for the bridge over I-5. I cannot remember what we chose. And I think for me, I hope that we can be cohesive with the potential bridge design, which is kind of part of the whole kitchen caboodle for the in town center, if I remember correctly. And I'm always driven to river stuff. I just hear a lot about that right now in our community, wanting more river access. We've had, well, maybe we also had a lot of testimony being on the river on the mind. But I think I would be open to whatever is more cohesive with the bridge design.
Thank you. And I'm skipping up and down because I don't have gallery view. I saw Councilor Ackerval first, I think.
I think Linville, I don't want to jump the line. I think Linville was ahead of me. She's saying, okay, I'll go quick because I know we got short on time. So do I think that these three different design concepts or palettes are representative of a range that may be appropriate for this project? Yes, I do. I think that it represents a range. I think, and then the second question was there like certain elements that really drew me in. I'll just say, there was aspects of all of them that I thought were interesting and could be good. There was one thing that gave me pause, so I'll share that. Sometimes it's good to know what didn't work out or didn't resonate, and that was on the design palette for the agricultural legacy one. The picture of the street light felt highly stylized kind of to me, and it didn't work with any other street lights we have in the city. And so I know you're not saying, hey, we're going to use this street light. It's just to give us a feel of things, but that definitely did give me pause. I think they might use those street lights in government camp or something. It just felt overly stylized, where the other ones felt more fluid and working with a variety. So,
Councilor Linville.
Well, I watched the planning commission deal with this one too, and I thought it was pretty funny to hear their comments, and no hay bales. I love that part of it. They didn't want those out altogether. And then, but I am a little bit concerned about the one item that's in there. I'm leaning towards the river as well. I do not like the agriculture one, and I think that technology is not consistent with the rest of our development here, and especially with what is being planned for the, I think the dips and ripples or whatever that is for the bridge. But I'm concerned about why keeping the brick to a minimum. What was that all about?
I don't recall. I remember that being a point of discussion, but I can't remember where that came from. I think they were trying to avoid overly, a lot of the buildings incorporate brick in town center, and they didn't want things to be overly repetitive in terms of materials. I'm thinking back to November.
Planner. That was my recollection as well. I think it was a recognition that that is a lot of the material that's currently built in the town center, and while that is great, I think there was a preference for some of the other natural materials.
Councilor Lehan. You're muted, I think.
I just wondered if these were being evaluated for their long-term maintenance ease or expense. I kind of like the river one too, but as I'm looking at it overall in the overhead view, looked like a lot of edges that have to be maintained, and you know. So I just wondering if there was any evaluation of that factor on any of them.
Yes, Councilor Linville, that is the next step in the process. If I had more time in the presentation, I would have gone on into the different review processes of this, and the technical and advisory committee that we have that's internal with staff is considering the feasibility, buildability, cost implications, long-term maintenance of this project, and trying to make sure that we have something that is really feasible for developers and for the city's public works department to maintain over time, and that will work with our goals and priorities.
We got a thumbs up from Councilor Lehan, and I will say, even though I'm an agriculture major and all of that, I am going with the river. And I like the technology too, but I thought it looked, maybe it's because of COVID. We can use some softer lines. We've been boxed in enough. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Bradford, really appreciate that. And that will, I'm now going to adjourn the work session at 7:02 p.m. and we will reconvene at about 7:10.
Yep, go ahead and mute your mics and unshare your videos, and we'll see you in about 8 minutes or so, 7 minutes.